Our next speaker is Ivan Zmojanski. It took me like 3 years to be able to say his name, and you'll figure out that everybody prefers to call him Flucky. No wonder. He's one of the most tech speakers, and he travels around the world with this little puppy called Bella, which has its own Twitter account, And one of the challenges that he takes on is to travel in most of the remote places and try to work from there. Like, I don't know, maybe a hurricane will catch him soon. So I invite you all to listen to Istvan, aka Flucky.
Okay. Can you hear me? Does it work? Is this thing on? Yes, welcome. And let me just switch to some slides. I took this photo just the other night because I was walking around. How many of you know this figure? I don't know if it has any Brussels-bound connotations. Please tell me about that on Twitter or something. But who knows the original of this thing? Where it is from? Anybody? Just shout it out. Space Invaders, right? Exactly. So we're going to be doing some space invading. I'm going to be invading your spaces, but not your personal spaces, because we have a code of conduct. What other spaces of you can I invade? JavaScript. Who knows about JavaScript here? Who doesn't know about JavaScript here? You're going to be bored out of your buttocks. I'm sorry. You might as well leave. I mean, I cannot show you anything else. Who knows about C here? Kernel C hackers? Sorry about that. I'm going to be invading your world. You're going to be pissed off. Please tweet at me or talk to me. But try to see the big picture. So what I'm going to be talking about after this 5-minute intro is JavaScript on microcontrollers. Not really, but creating JavaScript games in HTML5 in browser and putting them onto small microcontrollers. And why would I do that, or why would you want to do that? There is a little story about the whole thing. Before I start demoing stuff, there is a little story that we did a... Oh, yeah. Sorry, there is one thing I forgot to tell, but I think Johannes described it very well. So I'm a JavaScript developer, I'm a front-end trainer, I'm a Mozilla tech speaker, and I do travel with Bela all around the world. But I also give a lot of talks and I don't sleep, but one of these is just a rumor. So I'm a Tesla project member, and I've been doing JavaScript and hardware for 3 years now. So the little story starts with a thing called Happy Code Friends. Happy Code Friends was when we decided tech needs more diversity. People need more. We need more people who can code. But before you can tell someone that they need to code, you have to, spark something in there. They have to want to be coding. So how about introducing people to web development, mainly HTML5, CSS basics, and a bit of JavaScript. There is a whole lot of introductory content to HTML and CSS. There's a lot of tools out there. What we don't really find out there is a lot of very good JavaScript tools. You can find different things that could bring you into coding, but there are not a whole lot of these out there. So what I came up with is, everybody likes games, and I know somebody's going to raise their hand. I don't like games, but most people at least do. So how about, telling people that, games, all this cool stuff that you've seen or played, are made by people as well. Like, it was created by someone who knew how to code. And, most of the games you see, you would never imagine that you could be, even if you are a developer, you would never imagine that you could create a proper game with your skills. But actually, groups are pretty easy to create, and while I don't have the time to show you how can you create a game in like 15 minutes or so with a bit of JavaScript knowledge, I will demo you what you can do with it if you embrace the thought that can actually be done. So the whole thing turned out to be a thing I call code invaders. Code invaders is basically introducing people to programming concepts like functions, iteration, variables, like the basic concepts of programming, while at the same time they are actually creating their own game. We did a few experiments with this, and there is very good feedback. This is still a work in progress thing, but at some point it collided with my other huge love, which is IoT and microcontrollers. And the problem with microcontrollers is they are very, very, very limited in resources. So you cannot put, for most intents and purposes, you cannot put JavaScript running on a microcontroller. There are whole new stuff coming up, like JavaScript and Espruino, that will let you run JavaScript on a microcontroller hardware. I'm just saying that because I usually get questions like, how about this thing or how about that thing? There are things that run JavaScript on a microcontroller. I even like the Tesla project itself is proud to run JavaScript on a microcontroller, except the very first Tesla while you programmed in the microcontroller in JavaScript, and it was not compatible. It was actually transpiling your code to Lua and running it on the actual device in Lua. What you want to do though is you still want to create stuff in JavaScript because it's easy. Like you don't have to care about a lot of those stuff, memory management. Or the low level, just trying to concatenate a string in C will make you, lose a lot of hair, and I don't have a lot to lose anymore. So I decided that I don't want people to lose their hair. So how about creating a game in JavaScript and somehow compiling it to C in a way that it could be then run on a microcontroller that is an Arduino class microcontroller that has like 16 megahertz of a processor and maybe like 2 kilobytes of memory or maybe 30 kilobytes of programming space. What the microcontroller I'm talking about, let me show you just in a moment, if I can find the camera, is this one. If any one of you knows this, it's called the Arduino Micro. This is a AVR chip. It's basically 16 megahertz. It has 2 kilobytes of memory. That's like 2,000 bytes of memory, and you can put a program that's like 30 kilobytes on it. Usually what you do is you open your Arduino IDE and you write C code for this stuff. So what I'm not going to do today is open my Arduino IDE and write C code in there because we have this project and I want to show you what it can do. So the very interesting thing about this is just start out with a basic program. I have a sprite demo here. I'm gonna see if I can show it. Let's close this. Okay. Yeah, it's not super visible, is it? Yeah. Let me just try. That's a bit better, right?
Can you invert the colors?
Not at this point. In mid-talk. I should have thought about that earlier. Yeah. No, it's not super important, the code currently is. It's basically, this is just basic JavaScript code. Some of you who know ES6 will realize that. Some of you in the first 2 rows who can actually see it. So what happens here is basically JavaScript code. you can see it's exactly 67 lines of code. We have a small library that has some built-in stuff that makes this easier. Magic happens when I push this button. So what you will see a small bat just flying around the thing, and just flapping the wings. What you use here is basic games programming basics. You have a sprite on screen. This is the bat. You animate the sprite on screen by switching between two states, and you just throw it around on the screen. And every 60 times in a second, you just clear the screen and redraw it in a different place, which creates the effect of motion. We have some background text as well, but this is not too interesting. Where it gets interesting is when you actually start creating actual games. And I have here a small demo of the Code Invaders game, which might be more familiar to you. So exactly, again, this is just JavaScript code. You will know soon enough how far this is just JavaScript code. So you can do a few more sprites, just move them around on the screen. What you can also do is make it interactive, so I can control it, and sometimes you can even fire projectiles, but today is not that day. So here's the thing. You're seeing how it looks like. Okay, but how do you code this, and what does this have to do with people who never seen any code in their lives? So when we started doing building our materials, which will be open source hopefully, and which will be online so everybody could try themselves as well. So when we started building this material, these kind of things are really good way to introduce people to basic programming concepts. So if I will run you through the creation of this code, which is also, like I said, this is a bit more than 140 lines of code, like with a lot of empty spaces and comments. When you run people through this, hey, here you have a variable, and then you introduce what a variable is. Now people know, if you want to store at which position currently the monsters are or the turret is, you want to store it. You want to store it somewhere. So you introduce variables, and then you go on and introduce basic control flow. You introduce loops or conditions. And slowly, people, by having fun and creating their own games, start to embrace all the basic concepts that they will be using later. Where the magic happens is actually where the magic happens actually is this tiny device. If any of you, who of you know what Kickstarter is? All right, a lot of you. Yeah, so this device was crowdfunded maybe like 1.5 to 2 years ago, and it's called the Clouduboy. So what the Clouduboy is and does, and you will see in a moment, just let me sweat this out quick. So what the Clouduboy is and does is basically the exact same thing that you've seen right here, side by side. Is basically just a more nicer looking version of the contraption you see on the right hand side. The right hand side is basically, an Arduino Micro hooked up to a screen, hooked up to some microcontrollers, to some buttons and the buzzer. The Clouduboy is basically this exact thing in a much smaller, nicer package. So the idea was, you can get this thing or build it yourself, and people are going to make open source games for it. Except the problem was, the only way you could create games for it is in C with the Arduino IDE, which neither is very welcoming for starting up contributors. And there are a few folks who made really good games or really cool games, constrained by the memory space that they were given. But it wasn't really taken off in any big ways. And Most of it, the ecosystem is still growing. There are a lot of people having a lot of order boys back at their homes with, just as you have your Raspberry Pis and Arduinos at home, you ordered it, you played with it with a few moments, and then it sits on your shelf and not really looking into it. It's a very powerful device with its constraints, which is exactly what you here sees is a automatic translation of the JavaScript code that you just seen in the browser into C code and put it onto the device. So what happens in the background is basically when you use the Clouduboy IDE, this JavaScript code, when you push a button, is being translated into C code, and the C code is then compiled into machine code. And let me just push the compilation that will create us a compiled version that I can later open. What happens in the background is your JavaScript code is translated into C code. So it's not, there is not a whole lot of people compiling, JavaScript code to, straight to C, because then you start to experience a lot of edge cases. Like Castle's own JavaScript to Lua transpiler didn't really work out very well because of and Lua is practically a whole lot similar to JavaScript, not unlike C. When you start experiencing edge cases, then there is a problem. We have heard Rust talk about edge cases, and we actually heard about doing a lot of interactions between JavaScript and C during runtime. What happens here is compile time interactions. Your JavaScript code is turned into C code. There are a lot of constraints, of course, but for the sakes of creating the basic game and following some basic rules and not using some there was a mention to creating non-surprising output. So you're not trying to surprise the compiler, it will do just fine. And your JavaScript code will compile into C and will run on this tiny device as C code. So hopefully, yes. So the compiling has finished. So there is a hci.arduboy.ino showing up in here, which I just opened. And you're going to see that it compiled into actual C code, if you are going to see. Sorry about the colors here. So you're going to see that it actually compiled into C code. It's not nice, but it's actually readable. And even if there is something you cannot implement in the JavaScript code, and you're like a mad C code hacker, you can just do most of the stuff like with Corrode. You can just do most of the stuff in JavaScript and just do the very nitpicky parts by actually writing or modifying the C code. What will happen now is, let me try to get the camera on board and actually show you this live. So when I hit the compile button, what you will see, or not see, not that one. No. Let's try this again, shall we? No. That must, because I'm trying to compile the C code version, of course. Yeah, let's try this again. Oh, much better. Except we're running into an error. Not good. Yeah, it's a bit fragile as every demo. Oh, now you see the device lighting up, it flashes a few bits, and you see, so we just got our application compiled onto that. There's one more thing to that, so I'm going to zoom into this, because I'm running out of time fast. I'm going to show you, okay, so yeah, whatever, we implemented a IDE in JavaScript. Why is that important? Because the whole IDE, the whole editor, is implemented in JavaScript itself. It is just a web page. There's a whole lot of things that you can do with just a web page, including, how about, we have this tiny thing here. You might recognize, this is one of the enemies. How about, I'm not a very good drawer, but this might remind you something that FOSDEM. Close enough, right? So what I did now is I'm going to go into the code. I'm going to go in there. If you've ever seen this, this is basically binary data. All your sprites, all your image data is basically, hey, here's a pixel that is lit, here's a pixel that is not lit. When you are constrained on a tiny device, you have to make sure your images don't take up a lot of space. So you pack them into bytes and just do a byte stream. It's not like you can have compression in there, or like most likely you will not have much. So what these devices do is just put bitstream data onto the device itself that they are going to be using to be drawing onto the screen. So what happened now, if I actually now open the preview, which remember, this is still JavaScript. This is running in your browser. Then I can see that, yeah, close enough, we have our little FOSDEM invader. And now I'm just going to recompile the whole thing and hope for the best. Yes, it's flashing. And there you go. You just made a new game. I'm quickly running out of time, but I'm going to try to show you one more demo just to understand the implications of building something in the browser. What would that do? So as you might see or not, that is actually one of the most readable parts of the thing. This is running from a local server. So I actually hosting this off from my own mobile phone, which gives me the extra that I can actually access this computer's IP address from my phone, which is basically I can open this web page from my phone. So see what happens when I open this other invader in here. And let me just open you a camera view and show you my phone. No peeking up my notifications. Let me just reload this page. What you're going to see, this is your responsive web page. And responsive web pages have keyboards, but also interesting stuff that they can access the network. How about a monster like that? Not that. Maybe that's more monsterish. Let's say this. Oh, no. Let me just, yeah. And I just rewrote my image for my phone. Because you don't want to fiddle with your touch bar if you have a touchscreen device in your pockets, right? Like, not everybody has a touchscreen device, so why not just put it on your phone? And there's a lot of implications. Well, so what happens here is basically I'm connecting to the same web page from the same phone, and I'm pushing data between the two web pages, live updating in the same time. So I'm out of time. What I still want to say is, of course the best thing I haven't even showed you, but just for a moment, I have this whole thing running in here as well. Just to, oops. This is another game. You will be showing a version of this a bit later. You know what that is? Yeah, so you can even try this one yourself. There is a bit different version, a bit Mozilla 5 version, because if you go to this URL, cld.bi/Firefox, do we have this? No. You can actually play this thing. Sorry, no mobile phone access. I should put it in there. But if you have a computer, you will see this is the exact same game, except it has different images on it. I just made this, I just redraw some of these aspects in the last Mozilla Work Week in like half an hour. Learn more of the whole thing. It's called Clouduboy. Ask me around. I'm going to be here today and tomorrow in the Mozilla booth if you're interested, or if you want to know about the details. And do we have questions?
One.
We have one question, so make it a good one. We have time for one question. Yes? Yes, so the question was, how do I transpile the JavaScript code to C with blood and sweat? Basically, by hand you have a transpiler. It's tricky because you have to, JavaScript is not strictly typed, so you have to infer types and stuff like that. A lot of things are working, a lot of things are not working. Objects are not currently working. I'm working on arrays. Arrays are almost working, and there's a lot of boilerplate code in behind all this. There's one more idea. So the Clouduboy was just one device, but there are a whole host of devices that you could use and transpile the games you just created into, and just play them onto other devices as well as desktops and mobiles and all those things. So these are retro games, not anything like the next, Half-Life, but is a very interesting a way to follow all this. So you can see the slides, the slides have the links on the link above. You can get in touch at my Twitter account at slsoftworks, or find me at the Mozilla booth tomorrow. And thank you for your listening.
Thank you, Flecky.